Hey again YouTube, this is George's Heroes on the Union server, and probably past the halfway mark of posterity videos now for all my characters, because we're now moving on to my villain characters. We've pretty much covered the bulk of my heroes. There's one other hero character which will probably get a mild, quick video, but wasn't a particularly important one, wasn't a member of the Dunelm group, so yeah, we're moving on to the villain side now, red side. So here we are in Granville, just underneath the giant statue of Lord Recluse, and we're going to be looking at essentially my main brute in this video. I don't know yet whether this is going to go on to two parts or not yet. We'll just see how it goes. But this is Impervium Tower. Probably time that I actually would talk about Imperium Tower first, considering the last two hero characters was Ironworks and Steelhouse. Imperium Tower essentially is the final cyborg character that was created around the time of those two characters. Particularly in sort of backstory lore that was created for the character. Essentially, after the supposed failings of Ironworks and Steelhouse, the creator of those two, Neil Christopher Wilson, basically had gone mental. Pretty much gone insane after the supposed failures, and decided that he was going to make the ultimate killing machine. It was no longer just a case of proving a point. He just basically wanted to end everything to do with the Dunelm group, so end up creating Impervium Tower, which essentially is trying to amalgamate what was best about Ironworks and Steelhouse. So it is a cyborg, still a human brain, although this time it's not just a normal human brain, it's the one of a basically a psycho killer. He ended up obviously getting destroyed. He went out to join all three of them on the battlefield, but Ironworks decided that it was actually going against what his original intention was, so broke free and decided he was going to assist the Dunelm group, and took Steelhouse with them. Neil Wilson didn't like that one bit. Basically jumped on top of Tower right into his face and started shouting "kill, kill, kill." Impervium Tower duly obliged, starting with Neil Christopher Wilson. Massive battle ensues. The entire group at this point is getting decimated by the machine. They just can't handle him. Which eventually brings the first introduction to the Prince Bishop to essentially the group. That was essentially the end of the story. That's how Bishop essentially turned up. Ended up joining the Dunelm group. He basically came out of the group. He was the only one that was remotely able, to essentially stop the Impervium Tower in its tracks. So that was the basis of the story. Talking game mechanics wise, like I say, this is my main brute. Brutes essentially were, again, we're getting around to what was traditionally villain side only. Obviously, after they blurred the lines, that wasn't really villain specific anymore, and after that was a lot of brutes actually turned on the hero side as well, because it was a very, very popular archetype. Brutes essentially were the archetype that sat between scrappers and tanks essentially, so they didn't do as much damage as the scrappers in any way, shape or form. The thing with the brutes, if you actually notice, the green bar at the top right corner is the health, the blue bar is the endurance. Now the third bar there is fury. That fury bar would increase when a brute would enter combat, an attack, or is being attacked. And the idea is you had to keep getting into battles to keep maintaining essentially at the top end of the bar. Doing so essentially increased the damage output of the brute, so they didn't essentially start piling out the potential damage until they actually got to the top end. On most brute sets it was actually fairly easy to do, other ones it was a little bit difficult, but there was actually brute specific IO's recipes which there was actually a proc which allowed for faster Fury generation. Certainly on this character I never had a problem building Fury very quickly. It was I could get a boost with a temp power called Frenzy there, but just simply standing amongst the mob, it just, you know, usually on massive mobs such as this, and getting up to the top of the bar was fairly easy. But even at the top, they still didn't actually manage the sort of damage numbers that the Scrapper could do. The Scrapper was able to just simply out of the box do high-end damage, critical damage and whatnot, as well. They didn't have to build towards anything. So Scrappers were certainly a lot more consistent with their damage. The brutes were better, probably surviving-wise, but they didn't match that of a tanker. They were essentially just essentially below the tanker. So that's why I say they were somewhat in between the Scrapper and the tank. So better survivability than a Scrapper, better damage than a tank, and reasonable survivability as well. This particular power set that you're looking at is super strength, invulnerability. In the case of the brutes, the attacks were the primary and the defense was the secondary, much like the Scrappers. Although really, you would probably find that the brutes shared most of their powers with the tankers. But obviously, you'd have the brutes do more damage. Now, you probably notice obviously, well, Bishop is super strength as well, but Tower's actually doing different animations. It was around the time that they introduced power customization, finally, where you could actually pull your powers and turn off the visual effects if you wanted to, or keep the visual effects and just make them a different colour. Martial arts and super strength was the first sets that allowed for a choice between animations. Tower here is mostly using the original animations that were created for super strength. Bishop used mostly the new ones. The only difference is that Bishop kept the original knockout blow, which is the big uppercut power, because I felt that the swinging uppercut that he did suited his character better, whereas the double axe handle smash that Tower does here was probably more fitting for Tower. The original animations I always felt more brutish rather than heroic, so it meant they actually looked more like it was just simply just there to just smash you in the face really, really hard, essentially. So I actually stuck with the original animations for Tower, and apart from the knockout blow, really, and it added you know, a little bit of a difference between the two, because I was never really one for, you know, repeating power sets too much. You know, I have a lot of willpower characters, but you know, it got to a point where I even then I was like, you know, I don't really want to go willpower, it's too easy, I've done it loads of times, I want to try something different. So there's a lot of cases where I try and avoid, you know, going the same unless there's a specific reason why. I couldn't really think of any other attack set that really, you know, was better than super strength for both Bishop and Tower anyway. The more seemed to suit, although Tower was made before Bishop ever was anyway, as far as when I actually created it. But yeah, along with Bishop, Tower was probably the one that I IO'd out the most. So it's heavily IO'd out, it's gone through multiple builds in itself that Beat had come up with. I think this build that I ended up essentially sticking to is, again, ridiculous levels essentially. So the idea was to try and make this as survivable as possible, to essentially make a tank brute almost, which with certain sets like Invulnerability was actually quite easy to do with IO builds. So the IO build for this Invulnerability tune pretty can, you know, match a tanker Invulnerability build, you know, just as well. So we're beyond cap for defense and damage resistance. But on this particular build as well, Beat also came up with the plan for recharge. So foot stomp on this particular build, on this brute, is recharged every 5 seconds. I'm on permanent hasten, so I don't have to wait that, you know, as soon as hasten drops, it's already ready to go as well. But the main one the main power that essentially we were aiming at high recharge, what I requested was dull pain, which is this one here that's actually on auto fire. Dull pain on Invul essentially granted a temporary expansion to hit points, so massive hit points increased. Sorry, I'm just looking there for food over there. But obviously I had the recharge so quick that essentially dull pain was stacking, so I was on much higher hit points that you would normally be able to manage on Invul with a brute out of the box. So essentially got to the point. I've also got the T4 Destiny you've seen fired off there as well from the counter system. So just to ensure that the defensive damage is ridiculously high. So the character Impervium Tower essentially became the tanker brute for definite. I do have 2 of the brutes that you'll be seeing at some point shortly as well. And they're still pretty strong in their own right as well, but I think Tower, I would definitely call it my main, was played very heavily, pretty much a bit like Torv as well, where I would fire up the character and just basically do through missions for other people to get pumping as well, because again, like Bishop as well, you can see I've got the mobs on times 8, it was a full team, and they're not doing anything to me. But I will actually rip through them a lot quicker than Bishop as well, because obviously the extra damage that the group's doing in comparison to tanks. So yeah, whenever there was a situation that arrived where essentially a team would essentially want a tank, but they couldn't really sacrifice damage. They really needed the damage as well. I actually gave them the option, essentially, look, I can give you a tank type character and obviously still pipe out some fairly respectable damage as a brute, so it proved very popular amongst my friends and people on Sal's Badge Hunters for task forces and whatnot as well. So yeah, very popular character with other people, because it just gave them that little bit of flexibility. I mean, brutes couldn't technically aggro as well as tankers could, as such. They didn't have the inherent ability where they keep aggro based on attacking. They could keep aggro if they were, like, essentially attacks. I managed to get away with it by virtue of, you know, like I said, 5 seconds to stop mending. Most of the time the enemy will look towards me anyway, but Bruce also still had access to the Torn powers, just as the tankers did. So it was possible to make brutes tanky-ish. On a technical aspect, it wouldn't actually be as good as the tankers, but you could get away with it anyway. It worked for me most of the time. I would have Impervium Tower, you know, tank with the best essentially, but added bonus that he would actually do more damage. There was actually a lot of debates amongst people whether essentially it was gone a bit too far and essentially tankers were getting left behind, but there was still that percentage chance that Tower would actually get put down despite how strong he was. I mean, Bishop literally was unkillable. The only time he would go down was in incarnate content. There was still a very small percentage chance, but it would still happen that Tower would still go down in normal content. But it was still fairly rare, so you know, did its job essentially what we intended to do. Yeah, again, a character I'm going to miss playing a lot. Probably I will say that with all my villains essentially, because while I might have been able to recreate my heroes on Champions or maybe some other games and whatnot, I mean, Champions doesn't have the ability to create villains. You can sort of create a character and say it's a villain, but it doesn't really feel the same. It still plays out as a hero, and as such, I don't really have a playable version of him. He's on the game as the nemesis to Ironworks and Steelhouse, but not the same really. So there we go, we've blitzed through that mission and just about in time there before we've hit the 15-minute mark, I think. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it on the one part that I've pretty much said all I've needed to say about Impervium Tower. So yeah, one of my, again, another big favourite, certainly for Red Side Tunes and Red Side Gaming. So he will be sorely missed by me and others. So there we go, that was Impervium Tower, my main brute. So this is Jodas Welsh signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.